He raised a harmless creature into a monster. Now the tribal princess has no choice but to marry him. Kale watched the creature pulse in the dim light of the subterranean cavern, its multi-jointed limbs clicking softly against the smooth rock. He'd found it injured near the ruins of his escape pod, a small, luminescent thing he'd initially mistaken for some kind of fungal growth. He'd fed it nutrient paste from his survival pack, given it shelter from the damp chill, and watched it grow. Not just grow, but change. Its light, once a soft, steady blue, now flickered with erratic bursts of violet and angry crimson. It was no longer harmless. It was large, larger than his torso, its bioluminescent filaments thicker, harder, trailing behind it like jagged, glowing ropes. He'd called it Sparky at first, a ridiculous, very Earth name that felt like spitting in the face of this alien world that had stranded him. Now, looking at the destructive energy it radiated, he just felt a cold dread settle in his gut. He was a disgraced soldier, exiled for refusing an order that would have massacred civilians. Crash landing on this forgotten rock felt like the universe's cynical punchline. Finding these ancient, living towers felt like a bizarre second chance, until he messed that up too. He'd stumbled into a section of the towers that seemed abandoned, tending his injuries and Sparky in secret. He'd seen fleeting glimpses of the beings who lived here, tall, slender forms with skin that shifted in color like liquid light, communicating in resonant hums and gestures he couldn't decipher. He'd stayed hidden, a ghost in their living architecture, until Sparky's growth became impossible to contain. The creature's amplified light filaments, meant to gently weave and maintain the tower's atmospheric balance and energy conduits, were now lashing out, severing critical lines with violent, uncontrolled pulses. Sections of the tower were flickering, atmosphere thinning in distant chambers. He heard the resonant alarms echoing through the stone, felt the subtle shift in air pressure. They knew something was wrong. They would find him, and they would find Sparky. They found him in the chamber where Sparky had just torn through another vital light conduit, plunging a large section of the tower into emergency low light. The air thrummed with agitated resonance. The beings were silent as they approached, their skin tones shifting from calm indigo to sharp, questioning yellow and orange. There were half a dozen of them, warriors by the ceremonial energy blades they carried, crackling with contained power. Kale, armed only with a sharpened strut from his escape pod, felt ridiculously outmatched. He held up his empty hands. "Okay, look, it was an accident," he said, knowing they likely wouldn't understand his words, only the fear scent on his sweat and the tension in his posture. One stepped forward, taller than the rest, her light skin a cool, controlled silver blue despite the chaos. Her form was elegantly lethal, flowing lines of muscle visible beneath the shifting light. Her eyes, large and dark pools, fixed on him, then on Sparky, who was now huddled behind Kale, emitting frantic, jagged crimson pulses. Kale flinched. Sparky had never been aggressive towards him. The silver-skinned alien extended a hand, not towards him, but towards the creature. Sparky recoiled violently, releasing a deafening blast of purple light that threw Kale back against the wall. The warriors cried out in resonant shock, their lights flickering in alarm. The silver-skinned one stumbled back, her skin flashing through a spectrum of distress. She looked from the creature to Kale, her eyes widening as some form of resonant identification seemed to connect the two. Then she spoke, her voice a complex harmony of tones and clicks that somehow resolved into a few understandable words in Kale's translator implant, words gleaned from ancient signal bursts near his crash site. "Originator," she pointed at Sparky, then at Kale. "It reflects. Do?" The words, rough and translated poorly, hung in the air. "The originator?" Kale scrambled back to his feet, wincing. "If you mean I found him, but originator? Like I made him? No way." The silver-skinned alien ignored his protest. Her gaze intense, her companions had formed a wary semicircle, blades ready. Sparky, the mutated lumen weaver, whimpered behind him, its light dimming slightly as if sensing the hostility. The silver-skinned alien approached Kale again, cautiously. "Sure, resonance is bound to its chaos," she stated, her skin now settling on a wary gold. Kale had no idea what resonance she was talking about, but bound and chaos sounded bad. Look, I don't know what resonance is, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. I just found the little guy hurt, and I tried to help. I think my survival pack stuff maybe amplified him, made him grow weird. He held up a discarded nutrient pack wrapper. She looked at the wrapper, then back at Sparky, then at Kyle. Her skin shifted to a chilling, decisive emerald green. The unraveling, she intoned, a term the translator left untranslated, but which resonated with immense gravity in the air. You have initiated the unraveling. She looked at Kale, her expression hardening. By ancient law, you at one. Atonement could mean anything. Given the blades and the angry light shifts of her companions, it probably wasn't good. He prepared for the worst. Instead of attacking, she turned to her warriors, issuing a rapid series of resonant commands. They didn't attack Kale, they surrounded him, their movements precise and controlled, guiding him away from Sparky and towards a different part of the tower. He glanced back. The silver-skinned alien approached Sparky slowly, her hands still outstretched, her skin now a soothing, calm blue. The creature hesitated, then leaned into her touch. The anger in its light subsided slightly. He was taken deeper into the towers, through vast chambers where other beings moved like living light sculptures, their activities pausing as Kale, the human oddity, was escorted past. He felt their collective resonance shift, curiosity, alarm, something akin to revulsion. He was brought before a council in a chamber dominated by a massive, pulsating crystal that filled the space with soft, rhythmic light. These elders, their forms older, their light patterns more complex and stable, regarded him with solemn intensity. The silver-skinned alien, who Kale learned was called Anya, heiress of the light-held bloodline, stood before the crystal, addressing the council in resonant language he couldn't fully grasp. But her tone was formal, weighty. His translator occasionally caught a word: unraveling, originator, chaos, law, binding. He gathered Anya was explaining what had happened, identifying him and Sparky as the source of the tower's instability. After she finished, the council elders turned their light gazes on him. One, whose light was a deep, ancient violet, spoke. His voice, translated, was slow and deliberate. Human Kale, you have disturbed the fundamental weave of our world. The lumen weavers are the breath of the towers, the threads of our reality. Your enhancement, or the unraveling, has created a disruption that threatens existence. Kale opened his mouth to protest, to explain he didn't know, he was just trying to help, but the elder raised a hand, cutting him off. By the law of the resonance binding of the light held, the elder continued, he who initiates a fundamental chaotic shift in the weave, and whose resonance is bound to that shift, must be bound to the heiress responsible for restoring balance. This binding is for containment, for control, and for the potential of harmonious reweaving. Kale stared. Binding? What kind of binding? Like jail? The elder's light shifted slightly. A life binding. A ritual pairing. Anya stepped forward, her silver-blue light now tinged with a deep sadness that resonated even without translation. You will be bound to me, she stated, her voice quiet but firm, to contain the chaos you have brought and to fulfill the law. Kale felt the blood drain from his face. Bound? You mean like marriage? Because I fed a weird glowing bug? This was beyond ridiculous. It was insane. It is not marriage as your crude translator renders it. Anya corrected, her voice regaining some of its formal precision. It is a deep, irrevocable binding, a sharing of essence, of resonance, of faith. The law states that when a force of chaos is introduced that threatens the light weave, its originator must be tethered to the light holder responsible for the affected sector. Your resonance, however foreign, is now entangled with the amplified unraveling of the lumen weaver you fostered. Mine is bound to the inherent stability of the light weave. The binding is intended to create a bridge, a potential pathway to either contain the chaos or perhaps transform it. Her light shifted again, a reluctant rose color touching the silver. The alternative, should you refuse, is the severance of your resonance from this plane. Effectively, execution. Kale swallowed hard. So, marry the alien princess, because he accidentally created a glowing monster, or die. Some choice. Okay, let's back up, Kale said, running a hand through his hair. You're saying I have to become one with you because Sparky went nuclear. Can't we just, I don't know, unenhance him, put him in a box, find a different way? Anya's expression, conveyed through the subtle shifts in her facial structure and the flow of her skin light, was weary. We have tried to contain the unraveling. It resists all our known methods. Your initial contact has created a unique entanglement. The law is ancient, rigid. It was devised for specific, dire circumstances. Circumstances that now apply. Kale looked at the council elders. Their lights like ancient stars, unreadable. They offered no dissent. This wasn't a negotiation. All right, he said, feeling a strange mix of fear and dark humor. So, the law says, I gotta marry the princess because I broke the tower's plumbing with my pet project. Got it. Is there, a prenup? Or just till death do us part? Anya blinked slowly, her light shifting to a puzzled blue. Prenup? Death is the only release from the binding, should the bond endure the challenge it faces. Challenge, right? The challenge of containing the chaos he'd created. Okay, Kale sighed. So, what happens now? Big wedding? Little wedding? Just sign on the dotted line? Anya's light briefly flashed a sharp, exasperated violet before returning to controlled silver. There is a ritual. It requires proximity and a merging of resonances. Under duress, if necessary. The state of the towers allows no delay. It begins soon. Their confinement wasn't unpleasant, exactly, but it was surreal. They were given adjacent chambers, separated by a wall that shimmered faintly, allowing visual but not physical access. Food, which resembled glowing, nutrient-rich moss, was provided through a slot. Kale tried a bit, found it tasted vaguely of peppermint and regret. Anya remained on her side of the wall, a silhouette of shifting light. He watched her. She spent hours in what looked like meditation, her light steady and calm, occasionally sending out soft, pulsing resonances that Kale could somehow feel as gentle vibrations in his bones. He guessed she was trying to stabilize the towers, or perhaps communicate with the other light held. So, Kale called out eventually, breaking the silence. Princess Anya, you got a first name, or is it just Eris? Anya turned towards the wall, her light brightening slightly. My designation is Anya of the Resonant Line, she replied formally. Titles are contextual, right? Context. Mine's Kale. Just Kale. No titles unless disgraced soldier counts. A moment of silence. Your translator renders disgraced with tones of failure and expulsion, she said. Is that accurate? Kale shrugged, though she couldn't see it clearly. Yeah, pretty much. Messed up. Got kicked out. Landed here. He paused. Didn't mean to mess up your home, too. Her light softened to a warmer gold. The unraveling began subtly long ago. Your intervention merely accelerated what was already in motion. It is not solely your burden. This surprised him. You're not blaming me? Blame serves no purpose in the face of chaotic resonance. Anya stated. Understanding and adaptation are required. He sat down against the wall, feeling a strange sense of relief. He hadn't expected her to be reasonable, or at least not accusatory. Adaptive, huh? So, about this binding, how does it work? Do we hold hands and sing campfire songs? Anja's light flickered, and Kale realized she was trying to decipher his idiom. Campfire songs? No, it is a joint. Resonance to resonance. Mind to mind, in a limited capacity. The law requires it be initiated during a state of significant resonant disruption or shared vulnerability. To forge a connection resilient to chaos. Shared vulnerability. That sounded like fun, especially with a giant, angry Sparky running around. The state of significant resonant disruption arrived violently. The towers shuddered. Alarms screamed in piercing, dissonant frequencies. The air grew thin, crackling with wild energy. Through the shimmering wall, Kale saw Anya stand abruptly, her light flashing urgent warnings. The core conduits, she exclaimed, her voice tight with alarm. The unraveling has reached the primary nexus. The wall between them dissolved, the shimmering barrier flickering out of existence. "We must go," she said, her light a frantic pulsing red. Now, he didn't hesitate. He followed her, plunging into the chaotic heart of the tower's crisis. They moved through shifting corridors, dodging falling debris and lashing streams of wild light energy. He saw other light-held fighting desperately to contain the chaos, their bodies glowing with exertion, their resonance a symphony of stress. And he saw Sparky. Not one Sparky, but dozens, larger and more aggressive than the original, tearing through the air like glowing, multi-limbed missiles, their light filaments unraveling the very fabric of the tower. Kale felt a wave of nausea. He had done this. Anya led him towards the core nexus, a chamber where the pulsating crystal glowed with desperate flickering intensity. The air here was thick with uncontrolled resonance, painful to Kale's human senses. He felt dizzy, disoriented. "The law requires the binding be initiated here," Anya gasped, her voice strained. "Amidst the peak disruption, our resonances must attempt to anchor the core." They reached the nexus chamber. It was worse than he imagined. The main crystal was fracturing, leaking raw energy. Several mutated lumen weavers were clinging to it, their light tearing at its structure. "The binding," Anya urged, turning to him, her face a mask of strain, her light a desperate, blinding white. "We must connect, share your channel the originator's resonance through mine." Kale felt overwhelmed. Share essence? Channel Sparky's destructive energy through her? "How?" he yelled over the roar of the dying crystal. "I don't know how." "Touch me," she commanded, grabbing his arm. "Let the chaos flow. Let the law bind us." She pulled him close, pressing his hand against the center of her chest, where her light pulsed strongest. Their touch ignited something unexpected. Not just a transfer of energy or a conceptual binding, but a violent collision of realities. Kale felt a jolt rip through him, like being struck by lightning and plunged into ice water simultaneously. His human senses overloaded. The smell of ozone and alien flora, the piercing cry of the towers, the terrifying beauty of Anya's light flaring against his vision. But beneath the chaos, a new sensation bloomed. He felt her, not just physically, but something deeper, a vast, ancient weariness, a fierce determination, a profound loneliness that echoed in the chambers of her being. Her consciousness brushed against his, a wave of foreign data, emotions, and memories. He saw glimpses of the Lighthold's history, their connection to the towers, the sacred trust of the lumen weavers, the creeping rot of the unraveling that had plagued them for generations, subtly manipulated by those who sought to control the core. He saw the weight of her duty, the isolation of the heiress role, the expectation that she would solve a problem inherited from her ancestors. And she, in turn, felt him, his chaotic, grounded presence, the sharp tang of his human desperation, the unexpected kindness that had led him to nurture a creature he didn't understand, the deep-seated guilt of his past failures, the dry humor that was a shield. She felt the rough edges of his emotional landscape, so different from her people's nuanced resonance, yet undeniably real. The mutated lumen weavers attacking the crystal recoiled as their combined resonances collided. Anya's light surged, mingling with a strange, chaotic energy that Kale recognized as Sparky's amplified frequency, now anchored and directed through their physical connection. The crystal pulsed violently, but instead of fracturing further, it seemed to absorb their combined output. The binding, it was working. They were funneling the chaos, using their forced link to channel it, not just contain it. The pain was intense, tearing through Kale's body, but he held on, anchored by Anya's grip and the sheer force of her will. He felt the resonance solidify between them, a palpable cord of intertwined light and consciousness. This was the binding. This was the marriage. And it was happening in the most terrifying life-or-death way possible. The peak chaos subsided, not instantly, but receding like a tide after a storm. The piercing alarm softened to a low thrum. The wild energy lessened, though the air still felt thick and charged. The mutated lumen weavers, no longer attacking the crystal, drifted erratically in the chamber, their lights dimmer, less aggressive. Kale and Anya stood connected, chests heaving, their hands still pressed together. Kale felt the aftershocks of the resonance sink vibrating through his bones, leaving him weak and disoriented. He looked at Anya. Her skin light had receded from blinding white to a soft, shimmering silver, but her face was pale, her expression one of profound exhaustion and shock. The formal mask was gone, replaced by raw vulnerability. She met his gaze, and for the first time he felt the unshielded weight of her presence in his mind, a mixture of residual terror, lingering strain, and a confusion that mirrored his own. The binding was complete. He could feel it, not just as a physical connection that still tingled between them, but as an undeniable presence within his own consciousness, a faint echo of her thoughts and feelings. It was intrusive, terrifying, and strangely intimate. "Anya," he croaked, his voice hoarse. She didn't respond immediately, her eyes wide and unfocused. Then her light flickered, shifting to a color he hadn't seen before, a deep, vulnerable magenta. "The binding. Code, it is more complete than the law predicted," she whispered, her voice low, stripped of its formality. "Our resonances did not merely anchor, they merged. Right." That sounded about par for the course of his life lately. Find alien bug, break alien tower, get accidentally mind married to alien princess. Merged how? He asked, trying to process the enormity of it. "Can you read my thoughts now?" Her light shifted again, a hesitant goldenrod. "Not word, not directly, but I feel echoes. Your confusion, your fear, and something else." She paused, her gaze searching his face. Resilience, strength, unexpected warmth. Kale felt a blush rise up his neck. He wasn't used to having his internal state broadcast, however vaguely. Other light-held warriors entered the chamber, their lights flickering with concern. They approached Anya cautiously. "Eris," one resonated, their voice worried. "The core, it stabilizes." But the Eris's light. Anya pulled her hand from Kale's, and the intense, overwhelming connection lessened, receding to a humming presence at the edge of his awareness. He felt a strange sense of loss, even as the relief of separation washed over him. "The binding is completed," Anya announced, her voice recovering some of its formal tone, though it was still fragile. "The unraveling contained, for now, the originator's resonance, anchored to mine." She looked at Kale, her gaze steady. "He is bound, by law, and by the unforeseen depth of the resonance merging." Her light shifted subtly, back to a controlled silver. But Kale, now attuned to her in a way he couldn't comprehend, could feel the turmoil beneath the surface. The priests arrived next, their ancient light patterns radiating authority. The violet elder from the council surveyed the scene, his light solemn. He looked at Anya and Kale, standing side by side, the energy of the recent chaos still clinging to them. He resonated, addressing the gathered light-held and the newly bound pair. "The law is fulfilled. The binding achieved through trial by chaos. The originator is tethered to the light-holder. Now, law demands the consummation." Kale's jaw dropped. "Consummation? Now? After almost getting atomized?" He looked at Anya, whose light shifted to a sharp, almost pained azure. Consummation. He knew what that meant on Earth. Did it mean the same thing here? The violet elder's light remained steady. The merged resonance must be sealed, solidified, only through the physical union, the sharing of flesh as resonance, can the bond fully integrate and provide the strength needed to maintain the containment. Anya closed her eyes briefly, a flicker of anguish crossing her features before she masked it. This wasn't just a legal obligation anymore. It was intensely, terrifyingly personal, heightened by the forced intimacy of the mind merge. She was bound to this strange, crude human, not just legally, but somehow soul deep. And now, the law demanded she give him her body too. The consummation was not a ceremony, but another ordeal driven by the rigid interpretation of the law. They were escorted to a small, private chamber deep within the towers, a place that felt ancient and sacred, filled with soft, ambient light that resonated with deep stillness. The air here was cleaner, free of the chaos that had nearly killed them. They were alone. Kale stood awkwardly, watching Anya. She moved with a grace that was both alien and deeply feminine, her light a soft, introspective gold. He could still feel the faint hum of her presence in his awareness, a subtle echo that made his own thoughts feel loud and clumsy. He was acutely aware of his human body, its solidness, its opacity, its lack of subtle light communication. He felt rough and primitive beside her. "So," Kale said, breaking the silence, his voice shaky. "Consummation," the elder said, sharing of flesh, as resonance. Anya turned to him, her large eyes meeting his. The mask was still somewhat in place, but beneath it he felt her vulnerability, her reluctance, and something else. A strange, nascent curiosity stirred by the chaos binding. "Yes," she confirmed, her voice quiet. "The law dictates that the binding must be made manifest on all planes of existence. The resonant, the mental, the physical. The physical joining allows the merged resonances to fully anchor within the corporeal forms, strengthening the bond against external disruption." She hesitated, her light flickering with uncertainty. I, I have studied the ancient texts of the law. I understand its purpose. But the depth of the resonance merge, it is unprecedented. I feel your complexities, your history, within me. It is." Kale took a tentative step towards her. "Yeah, well, getting a download of the history of your people and the emotional baggage of the Harris isn't exactly a walk in the park for me either," he said, trying for levity, but it fell flat in the solemn chamber. "Look, Anya, I know this isn't how you wanted this. This whole situation isn't messed up, but the law says we have to. And honestly, after what we just went through, I feel—" He searched for the words, the strange, new sensations swirling within him. "Connected, in a way I don't understand. But it's there." Anya's light shifted to a contemplative blue. "Connected," she echoed softly. "Yes, the resonance. It is strong between us now. Amplified by the chaos, solidified by the merging." She took a slow, deliberate step towards him. "The physical act, a pair, it is meant to be a final anchor. For my people, it is often initiated through focused resonance sharing, building a connection that flows into the physical. With you, it will be different." Different was an understatement. He was human. She light held. He had no idea how their bodies were supposed to interact in any meaningful way beyond touching hands. But as she drew closer, her scent, a clean, mineral smell, mixed with something like blooming night flowers, filled his senses. Her light pulsed gently, creating shifting patterns on the floor around them. He could feel the warmth radiating from her body, a soothing counterpoint to the recent terror. She raised a hand, not to touch him, but extending it, palm open. "The texts speak of reciprocal vulnerability," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "A mutual unveiling." Slowly, hesitantly, she began to dim her internal light. The shimmering silver faded, revealing the subtle lines and contours of her form beneath. It was an act of profound trust, of stripping away the visual language her species used for communication and emotion, leaving only the physical reality of her body exposed to his gaze. Kale watched, mesmerized. It wasn't erotic in a way he understood, not yet. It was sacred, terrifying, and utterly disarming. He felt a pressure building within him, a need to respond, to offer his own form of vulnerability. He reached out, trembling slightly, and gently touched her arm, his rough human skin against her cool, surprisingly smooth surface. It was a simple touch, but it felt monumental. The resonance hummed stronger between them. As their physical contact deepened, a strange transformation occurred, guided by the latent energy of the binding and the chamber's ambient resonance. It wasn't a merging of forms, but a merging of sensations. When Kale kissed her, tentatively at first, then with growing urgency, he felt not just the pressure of her lips, the surprising softness of her skin, but also the internal light within her, shifting, flowing, responding to his touch. Her light pulsed against his tongue, echoed in his mouth, a warm, sweet energy that resonated through his entire body. When she touched him, her hands tracing the contours of his face, his chest, she felt his blood coursing beneath his skin, the rhythmic beat of his human heart, a sensation alien and grounding. Her touch amplified his own senses, making him hyper-aware of every point of contact, every breath, every rustle of fabric. And through the resonance, their emotions flowed, raw and unbidden. Anya felt his awkwardness, his desperate need for connection, his carefully buried tenderness, surfacing under the weight of this impossible situation. Cal felt her deep reservation, her forced obedience to the law, but also a growing, hesitant wonder at the novelty of his physical presence, the stark difference of his being, the unexpected pleasure his touch evoked. It wasn't a conquest or a submission. It was an exploration, born of obligation but quickly evolving into something else. They learned each other's physical landscape, guided by the echo of their merged resonances, a silent conversation that transcended words. There was no artifice, no pretense, only the raw reality of two fundamentally different beings coming together under impossible circumstances, their bodies and their newly linked consciousnesses, seeking anchor and solace in the midst of chaos. The act was physical, yes, driven by the law's demand for consummation, but it was also deeply, profoundly emotional, a raw expression of vulnerability and a hesitant embrace of their shared, uncertain fate. The sacred chamber hummed around them, witnessing the forging of a bond that was both ancient and unprecedented. The aftermath of the consummation was a delicate quiet, heavy with unspoken questions and residual intensity. Cale lay beside Anya on the soft, woven surface they'd shared. His body felt both drained and strangely alive, his senses still heightened, the hum of her presence a constant, gentle vibration in his awareness. Anya's light had returned to a soft, steady silver blue, a serene surface that he knew now concealed a complex inner landscape. She lay on her side, facing away from him, her breathing slow and even. He resisted the urge to reach out, unsure how to bridge the gap that physical intimacy had somehow widened and narrowed all at once. The forced nature of their union, dictated by ancient law and chaotic circumstance, hung between them. Yet the resonance merge, the vulnerability of the consummation, had created something undeniably real. He had touched her soul, and she his in a way he couldn't articulate. "Anya," he said softly, his voice rough. She stirred, turning slightly to face him. Her eyes were dark pools in the dim light, reflecting the soft glow of her skin. "Cale," she replied, her voice quiet. "The binding, it feels different now." "Stronger," he nodded, agreeing. "Yeah, like it's settled inside. Not just something external that was forced on us." A moment of silence stretched between them. "Was it?" Cale started, then hesitated. "How did you ask an alien princess if their forced ritualistic resonance-amplified sex was okay? Was it okay for you?" Anya considered the question, her light liquoring with introspection. "It was intense," she finally said, "and revealing. To feel your presence so strongly, integrated with the physical act, it was unlike anything described in the texts, or anything I have ever experienced." She paused, her light shifting to a thoughtful gold. It was not merely obligation, the resonance, the shared vulnerability. It created something. She didn't name it. Love? Desire? Necessity? He didn't know. He only knew that the cold, hard edges of their forced union had blurred, softened by the raw, unexpected intimacy. Their new reality as the bound pair was immediately tested. The Violet Elder and several priests arrived shortly after dawn, their resonance patterns formal and demanding. They spoke of the stabilized core, the contained unraveling, but their focus was on the completed bind. "The law requires the consummated pair to present themselves to the council," the elder resonated, "to confirm the strength of the bond and determine the next steps in managing the chaos." Cale felt a surge of resentment. Manage the chaos he created, now inextricably linked to her. Anya rose, moving with a regal bearing that seemed at odds with the vulnerability he'd glimpsed just hours before. Her silver light was steady, controlled. She was the heiress again, the light holder. But Cale, now bound to her, could feel the layer of fatigue and apprehension beneath her composure. He rose too, feeling awkward and out of place. He was a disgraced human soldier, now ritualistically married to the princess of this alien world. His life had taken a turn so bizarre, it felt like a bad sci-fi novel. As they walked together towards the council chamber, Anya spoke quietly, for his ears alone. The priesthood holds significant influence, she explained, her voice low. Some lines resent the light held, seek to undermine our authority. They manipulated the interpretation of the law regarding the unraveling, hoping to expose my bloodline's weakness. Now they must accept the binding, but they will seek to control its outcome. Control. Kale felt a familiar prickle of defiance. He knew corrupt authority. He defied it on Earth, and it had cost him everything. Maybe here with Anya, bound to her, he could stand against it again. So they wanted to trap you, he said, his voice dry. Guess they didn't count on the human wild card actually solving the problem, sort of. Anya's light shifted slightly, a hint of amusement touching her silver. Your presence is unexpected, she conceded. But the chaos is still potent. The mutated weavers are contained, but not reverted. They still resonate with the amplified unraveling. Only our combined resonance, the bound resonance, seems capable of interacting with them safely. Their challenge wasn't over. The monster he'd created, and the political machinations surrounding it, would continue to force them together. The council meeting was a masterclass in alien political theater. The elders questioned them, their resonant inquiries probing the strength of the binding, the nature of their connection, the potential for controlling the mutated lumen weavers. Kale stood beside Anya, feeling the constant hum of her presence within him, a quiet reassurance in the face of the imposing council. When it was his turn to speak, through the sometimes clunky translator, he was blunt. Look, I didn't mean to break anything. I was just trying to help a creature that was hurt. I messed up. Big time. But whatever this binding thing is, it feels real. And yeah, I can feel Sparky, the big glowing jerks, in a way I couldn't before. Maybe together we can figure out how to fix this. He used earth slang, simple terms. Cutting through the formality, he saw the elders' lights flicker with surprise, perhaps even distaste. Anya then spoke, her voice resonating with the weight of her lineage and the power of their new bond. She didn't just state facts. She projected a sense of unity with Kale, a shared purpose that resonated through the chamber. The binding is strong, she declared. Forged in chaos, solidified through mutual vulnerability. We are bound not just by law, but by the unforeseen merging of our essences. The originator's chaotic resonance and the light holder's inherent stability are now intertwined. We believe this unique connection is the key to reweaving the disrupted fabric of the towers, and perhaps restoring balance to the unraveling itself. She looked at the violet elder, her gaze steady. The law has provided the means. We will apply ourselves to the task. The elders conferred in silent resonance. The rival priesthood members on the council exchanged uneasy glances. Anya and Kale, the unlikely pair, had turned a forced union meant to contain chaos into a potential solution, validating the ancient law in a way the manipulators hadn't intended. The council ruled. The binding was legitimate, irrevocable. The bound pair was tasked with finding a way to control and integrate the mutated weavers, using their unique resonance. Their fate, and the fate of the towers, was now inextricably linked. They were married by law, by chaos, and by a strange, burgeoning connection. Life as the bound pair was a peculiar blend of high-stakes problem-solving and forced, domestic intimacy. They spent their days studying the mutated lumen weavers, trying to understand how Kale's presence and his survival tech had amplified their abilities. They used their combined resonance, experimenting with different frequencies and intentions, finding they could influence the creatures, calm their destructive energy, even direct their movements. It was painstaking, dangerous work, often conducted in precarious sections of the towers still showing the scars of the unraveling. Kale's practical ingenuity, his willingness to try unorthodox solutions, often clashed with Anya's millennia of ritual knowledge and deep respect for the tower's natural balance. But the clash was productive. They learned from each other, their disagreements often dissolving into moments of shared vulnerability, amplified by the faint echo of the resonance between them. In the evenings, they returned to their shared chambers. The initial awkwardness from the consummation slowly faded, replaced by a quiet companionship. They talked, Kale explaining Earth concepts, democracy, pizza, bad movies, and Anya sharing insights into the light-held culture, their history, the complex nuances of resonant communication. Their conversations, initially formal, grew more relaxed, punctuated by moments of shared laughter at cultural misunderstandings. Kale's dry humor, once a shield, became a way to navigate the absurdity of their situation, and Anya, who had lived a life of rigid duty and emotional restraint, found herself unexpectedly charmed by his irreverence. The physical aspect of their bond developed organically. It wasn't just about fulfilling the law anymore. The deep peccant forged during the binding and consummation, the constant awareness of each other's presence through the resonance, created a natural intimacy. Touch became comforting, then desirable. They explored each other again, not under duress, but with curiosity and growing affection, learning the language of human touch and alien light, finding a surprising harmony in their differences. The external conflict with the priesthood and rival bloodlines remained, a constant pressure, but within the walls of their shared life, something real and hopeful was growing. One evening, curled together in their chamber after a particularly frustrating day with the mutated weavers, Kale felt Anya's resonant presence beside him intensify. "Kale," she murmured, her voice soft. "Earlier when the high priest addressed us, I felt his intention through the binding. It was cold, manipulative. He spoke of containing the unraveling, but he seeks to redirect its power, to hoard it, not heal it." Kale felt a chill. He'd sensed the high priest's animosity, but the resonance link allowed Anya to perceive deeper intent. "He's still trying to use this for power," Kale said. "Just in a different way now that we're bound." Anya shifted, her light dimming slightly. "Yes, he plans to propose a new ritual to the council, a ritual of controlled reweaving. It would place the bound pair under the direct authority of the priesthood, ostensibly for guidance. But in truth, it would make us instruments of their will. They would use our unique resonance to control the weavers, and thus control a fundamental power source of the towers." This was it. The final move in the priesthood's gambit. "We can't let that happen," Kale stated. "We came here to fix the towers, not hand them over to power-hungry bureaucrats." Anya turned to face him, her light a determined blue. "No, we will not." She reached out, placing a hand on his chest, directly over where their resonance felt strongest. "The law of binding states the pair is responsible for re-establishing balance. It does not cede that authority to the priesthood. We can challenge their interpretation, but challenging the priesthood meant risking everything. They held immense cultural and political power." "How?" Kale asked. "They have the law. They have tradition. We have the binding," Anya said, her voice gaining strength. "We have the genuine resonance with the chaos. We have the proof that their methods failed and ours, forged through this improbable union, hold the only true potential for healing. We challenge them through a duel of resonance before the full council. The law allows for such a challenge when the interpretation of duty is contested. A duel great is rusty combat skills versus whatever alien resonance duels involved." But he looked at Anya's determined light, felt her resolve through the binding, and knew he would face anything with her. Their bond, born of chaos and forced proximity, had become a partnership he would fight for. The duel of resonance was held in the grandest council chamber, the air crackling with anticipation. Kale stood beside Anya, facing the high priest and his chosen champions. The duel wasn't fought with physical weapons, but with controlled bursts and intricate patterns of resonance, projected through the chamber's crystalline matrix. It was a battle of wills, of intent, of the very fabric of their beings. The high priest's resonance was a cold, imposing wave, attempting to dominate to suppress Anya and Kale's connection. Anya countered, her resonance a flowing, intricate shield, deflecting his attacks, drawing strength from the depths of the towers she was sworn to protect. Kale, initially unsure how to contribute, found he could channel Sparky's chaotic resonance through their bond, not destructively, but as a disruptive, unpredictable force that destabilized the high priest's rigid control. He was the chaos anchor, Anya the stability. Together their resonance was a dynamic, unpredictable force that the priesthood couldn't match. They didn't just fight, they projected their truth through the resonance, the reluctant bond forged in crisis, the genuine effort to heal, the unexpected depth of their connection. It was a public display of their private reality, broadcast directly into the minds of the council and all who were sensitive to the resonance. Anya, drawing on their shared experience, projected images of the tower's near collapse, the desperation of the moment, and the unprecedented merging that saved them. Kale, amplifying her projection with his unique chaotic resonance, showed the vibrant though volatile energy of the mutated weavers, now responding to their touch, their direction, something the priesthood had never achieved. The high priest's carefully constructed arguments, his claims of sole authority, crumbled under the weight of this raw, undeniable truth. Their bound resonance, a synthesis of human and light-held, of order and controlled chaos, proved superior. The council declared Anya and Kale the victors. Their interpretation of the law stood. They, the bound pair, were the true guardians of the light weave, not the priesthood. The manipulation had failed. Their forced marriage had saved the towers, and in doing so had saved them too. In the quiet aftermath, the towers began to heal. Under the guidance of Anya and Kale's combined resonance, the mutated lumen weavers were slowly integrated back into the tower's systems. Their amplified light, once destructive, was now channeled into strengthening conduits, providing new sources of energy, even creating areas of vibrant, chaotic beauty within the ancient stone. It was a delicate balance, requiring constant attention from the bound pair, but it was a balance they were uniquely suited to maintain. The priesthood's power waned, their authority diminished by their failed gambit. Anya, no longer just a heiress, but a leader who had saved her people through an unprecedented act of adaptation, began to enact reforms, guided by the wider perspective the binding had given her. And Kale, he was no longer a disgraced soldier in exile. He was the bound one, the originator who had brought chaos and inadvertently the means of its control. He had found a home, a purpose, and a partner in the most unlikely of places. Their marriage, born of ritual obligation and desperate necessity, had blossomed into something profound. They governed the towers together, their different perspectives complementing each other. They continued to explore the depths of their connection, the subtle language of resonance and touch, finding endless fascination in each other. There were still moments of cultural confusion, flashes of dry humor born from Kale's earth idioms, meeting Anya's formal precision. But beneath it all was the steady hum of their joined essences, a constant reminder of the bond that had saved them, and the love that had grown in the shadow of chaos. They were a human and an alien, bound by ancient law and shared fate, navigating a future neither could have ever imagined. Together,